Right now at this hour, a major hurricane is moving westward across the Pacific Ocean, and it has one destination directly in its path, the Hawaiian Islands. The storm is carrying winds of 85 miles per hour. It sits 825 miles from the Big Island. It is closing that gap at 14 miles per hour. Waves taller than a one-story house are already building along east-facing shores, and they are arriving before the storm itself does. And this morning, the United States Coast Guard locked down every commercial port across the state, from Hilo to Honolulu, because the threat window is now. This is not a routine weather system moving safely past an empty stretch of ocean. Something significant is bearing down on 1.44 million Americans who live on islands with no road out and no way off. Today, the plan is simple. Break down exactly where this storm is, what it will do to each island as it passes, and the one thing forecasters keep saying quietly that no one else is reporting. No guessing, no dramatizing. Just the facts, the science, and the real stakes for the people living on those islands right now. If you have ever been to Hawaii, or if you have family there, drop a comment below and tell us which island, because what is coming looks different depending on exactly where you are standing. If you follow this channel, you know the pattern here. Every storm that threatens American lives gets covered before it arrives. Subscribe now, because the next system behind this one is already forming, and it will be tracked in real time. Start with the ground truth. As of this hour on July 26, Hurricane Fausto sits 825 miles east-southeast of Hilo and roughly 1,050 miles east-southeast of Honolulu. That is the distance from New York City to Chicago, and the storm is closing it at 14 miles per hour on a steady westward heading. The math is not complicated. At that speed, the closest approach window opens Tuesday night and holds through Wednesday morning. That is the arrival window the National Hurricane Center is now working against. Fausto is currently a Category 1 hurricane carrying sustained winds of 85 miles per hour. To put that in human terms, 85 miles per hour is faster than a car on an interstate highway. Wind at that sustained level rips branches from mature trees, peels roofing material off homes, and turns loose outdoor objects into projectiles moving faster than a person can react. Just days ago, the storm was stronger. Fausto peaked as a Category 2 with sustained winds near 100 miles per hour before the ocean around it began to work against its structure. That downgrade matters, but it does not remove the threat. It reshapes it. The hurricane force wind field, meaning the zone where sustained winds hit 74 miles per hour or higher, extends 35 miles out from the storm's center. 35 miles is not a lot of margin. A southward track shift of that distance, roughly the drive from downtown Honolulu to the North Shore, places that wind radius directly over inhabited coastline on Kauai. That is the margin between a close call and a direct impact. The tropical storm force wind field is much wider. It reaches 150 miles out from the center. Tropical storm force winds, sustained winds between 39 and 73 miles per hour, are strong enough to snap tree branches, drive unsecured objects through windows, and make roads dangerous to drive on. That zone can reach the islands even if the eye of Fausto never does. By the time the storm arrives at its closest point of approach, forecasters project sustained winds down to around 45 miles per hour. 45 miles per hour is still enough to bring down trees weakened by rain, drop power lines, and knock out electricity for tens of thousands of homes. Two terms are driving every advisory being issued right now. The first is the cone of uncertainty, the shaded zone on a hurricane forecast map that shows where the center of the storm could reasonably end up. It does not show where the storm's effects will be felt. Dangerous waves, winds, and rip currents extend well beyond its edges. A storm sitting on the north side of the cone still sends its water and its wind south. The second term is vertical wind shear, winds at high altitude moving in a different direction or at a different speed than winds down near the ocean surface. That difference tears a hurricane apart from the top down. Right now, vertical wind shear is the main force weakening Fausto, and it is the main reason forecasters expect a weakened storm to arrive at Hawaii rather than a Category 2. It is reassuring, but it is not a guarantee. Shear conditions can shift within 24 hours. But the wind is only part of what forecasters are watching. The more immediate danger is already in the water. The storm has not arrived. The ocean already knows it is coming. High surf is building right now on east-facing shores across Oahu and the Big Island, and the swells reaching those coastlines this morning are the leading edge of what Fausto is pushing across 800 miles of open Pacific. The National Weather Service is forecasting waves of 10 to 14 feet on east shores of Oahu and the Big Island through Wednesday. A 14-foot wave is taller than a standard one-story house. When water at that height crashes over a road, that road is not passable. When it hits a parked car, the car moves. There's a second wave source hitting the islands from a completely different direction at the same time. A south swell of 7 to 10 feet is already breaking on every south-facing shore in the chain. That swell is not from Fausto. It is unrelated. Two large wave events are converging on the islands simultaneously from opposite sides. Name the roads. Kamehameha Highway runs along the windward coast of Oahu at sea level. When east-facing waves climb into the 10 to 14-foot range, that road floods. Emergency vehicles cannot reach communities north of the flooding. Residents cannot drive south. On the Big Island, Bayfront Highway in Hilo runs the same risk, same elevation, same exposure, same problem when the water arrives. Then there's the invisible danger under the surface. A rip current is a fast, narrow channel of water flowing away from shore through the surf. It moves faster than an Olympic swimmer at full sprint. It does not look dangerous from the beach. It is what pulls people out to sea. Most ocean drownings in Hawaii do not happen because of the height of the waves. They happen because of these hidden rivers. The National Weather Service used the phrase life-threatening in its current advisory for a reason. The numbers behind that phrase are stark. Over the last decade, roughly 800 people have drowned in Hawaii's waters under normal conditions. That averages to 80 per year. Storm-elevated waves and rip currents do not just raise that number, they compress it. What normally happens across months of the year can happen in a matter of days when a system like Fausto lifts the sea state across every shoreline at once. The United States Coast Guard is treating this seriously. As of July 24th, the Coast Guard set Port Heavy Weather Condition Whiskey across every commercial port in the state. Port Heavy Weather Condition Whiskey means a Coast Guard designation that significant weather is expected within 72 hours. Port operations shift to heightened readiness, and vessel movement is restricted. For an island chain that imports the vast majority of its food, fuel, and medicine by sea, that lockdown is a real-world impact before the storm arrives. Grocery deliveries pause, fuel shipments hold offshore, the supply chain narrows. The reach of the storm is longer than most people realize. Fausto's south-southwest swell is already generating dangerous rip currents along Southern California beaches, more than 2,500 miles from the storm's center. Lifeguards from San Diego to Los Angeles are pulling swimmers from the water because of a hurricane that has not yet reached Hawaii. To understand what comes next, you have to understand what has happened before, because Hawaii has been in this position before, and the history of what those storms actually did is not what most people expect. The last time a major hurricane made direct landfall on the Hawaiian Islands, the date was September 11th, 1992. That is 34 years ago. Frame that in generational terms. An entire adult generation on these islands has never lived through a Category 4 impact. Most residents under the age of 50 have no personal memory of what a direct hit actually looks and feels like on the ground. Hurricane Iniki came ashore on Kauai in September 1992 as a Category 4. Sustained winds hit 140 miles per hour. Wind gusts pushed past 150 miles per hour. Those are not abstract numbers. Sustained winds of 140 miles per hour ripped the walls off wood frame homes and lift vehicles off the pavement. Iniki damaged or destroyed 14,000 homes on Kauai alone. Kauai's population today sits between 58,000 and 67,000 people. That damage total was effectively one home per family on the island. Not a neighborhood, not a district, the whole island. The damage figure at the time came in at $3 billion in 1992 dollars. Adjusted for today's construction costs and the far greater level of development along Hawaii's coastlines, that figure would be substantially larger if the same storm struck now. Then there is the storm that never made landfall at all. Hurricane Lane, August 2018. Lane never touched Hawaiian soil. It still dropped 58 inches of rain on the Big Island. 58 inches of rain in a matter of days is one of the wettest storm totals in United States recorded history, and it happened without a landfall. Landslides slid down slopes across the Big Island. Roads washed out. Flooding cut off communities. On Maui, brush fires driven by Lane's outer winds burned neighborhoods while other neighborhoods flooded. One storm, two disasters running at the same time. No landfall. The closest historical analog for Fausto's expected track is Hurricane Celia in 2016. Celia followed a similar path across the eastern and central Pacific. It was also downgraded from a Category 2 to a tropical storm before it passed north of the island chain. Celia never made landfall. It still produced elevated surf that closed beaches, gusty winds that dropped power lines, and rainfall that flooded low-lying areas. That is the most likely model for what Fausto delivers on Tuesday night into Wednesday. Here is the core lesson of the record, and it is the part that gets lost in every forecast graphic. In Hawaii, the official distinction between a direct hit and a near miss means less than most people assume. When a storm is large enough, and when the ocean around it is warm enough, the wave field, the rain field, and the rip current field all extend far beyond the eye of the storm. Iniki proved what a direct hit does. Lane proved what a miss can still do. Celia proved that a weakened storm passing north is not the same thing as a safe storm. The historical record makes this case with numbers. Fausto's arrival will be tested against it. Every one of those historical storms arrived at islands in better shape than Hawaii is in right now. And that is the part of this story that no one else is covering. Every other story about this storm starts and ends with the forecast track. This part of the story starts somewhere different. It starts with what the islands looked like before Fausto appeared on any map. 4 months ago, in March 2026, a series of Kona low storms struck Hawaii. A Kona low is a slow-moving low-pressure system that can dump extreme rainfall on the islands. It is not a hurricane. It is still devastating. The March event washed out highway sections across multiple islands, overwhelmed municipal water systems, and cracked structural supports on critical infrastructure, including the Yao Stream Bridge on Maui. The Wahiawa Dam on Oahu was pushed dangerously close to capacity by the runoff. The current estimate for infrastructure repair costs from that March event stands at $1 billion. Those repairs are not complete, not close to complete. The state entered Fausto's window still carrying the damage from the last event. Behind that $1 billion figure sit real people waiting on federal support. More than 3,600 residents applied for FEMA assistance after the March storms. As of July 2026, they were still waiting for aid. That is 3,600 families who never got made whole from the last disaster now standing in the path of the next one. On July 12th, a Honolulu City Councilman issued a formal warning. He stated that neglected flood infrastructure and fractured emergency response systems leave Oahu unready for a major cyclone. That is not a commentator saying that. That is an elected official with direct knowledge of the system saying the system is not ready. 2 weeks later, Fausto formed in the Eastern Pacific. The bones of the flood control system are older than most residents realize. Hawaii's drainage networks were engineered and built in the 1960s. They were designed for storm intensities that belonged to a different era of climate. They were not built for what is arriving now. When a system built for a 1960s storm meets a 2026 rainfall total, the excess water goes somewhere. It goes into streets, into homes, and into the ocean, carrying whatever it collected on the way down. The road network faces a parallel problem. Roughly 40 miles of coastal roads across Hawaii are already at risk of sea inundation under current baseline conditions. That is before any storm surge, before any wave overtopping from a hurricane. Those 40 miles are the same roads people use to evacuate. If wave action from Fausto cuts them before the peak of the storm arrives, communities on the wrong side of the flooding get trapped in place. Then there is the economic exposure. Research from Hawaii Sea Grant estimates that a direct hurricane hit on the islands would produce approximately $40 billion in infrastructure and economic loss. Hawaii's total state gross domestic product runs between $90 and $100 billion annually. A direct hit would wipe out close to half of everything the state produces in an entire year, not over a decade, in a single event. Port heavy weather condition. Whiskey needs to be reframed in this context. It is not just a weather designation. It is a supply chain event. Hawaii imports the vast majority of its food, fuel, and medicine by sea. When commercial ports lock down, the shelves in every grocery store on every island start counting down. Under normal conditions, the islands run on about a 2-week supply of consumables. That clock started ticking on July 24th. The official forecast says Fausto will weaken and pass north. That is the best case scenario the science currently supports. Here is the question this section leaves on the table. What does the best case scenario actually look like when it arrives at a chain of islands still trying to repair itself from the last disaster, still waiting on federal aid, still running on infrastructure built for a different climate? Fausto did not form by accident. It formed in conditions that are actively getting more extreme, and those conditions are not leaving when this storm does. The Pacific Ocean this summer is running hotter than normal in a specific pattern that scientists have been tracking since the start of the year. That pattern has a name. It is called El Niño, a periodic warming of the central and eastern Pacific Ocean that raises sea surface temperatures, reduces the vertical wind shear that normally breaks tropical storms apart, and pushes more tropical activity into the waters surrounding Hawaii. When El Niño strengthens, it acts as a fuel system for Pacific hurricanes. The measurement that matters is the sea surface temperature anomaly in the Niño 3.4 region, a stretch of the central Pacific that scientists use as the reference zone for El Niño strength. As of mid-July, that anomaly is running at 1.3 degrees Celsius above the long-term normal. 4 weeks earlier, the same number was plus 0.9 degrees Celsius. It is rising. It is not stabilizing. NOAA now assigns an 81% probability that the 2026 El Niño reaches very strong classification by the October through December window. 81% is not a possibility. It is a near certainty. In previous very strong El Niño years, the Eastern Pacific has averaged 23 named storms in a single season against a long-run normal of 15. That is 50% more tropical systems than a typical year in the same ocean basin. The pace this year is already tracking ahead of schedule. By late July 2026, the Eastern Pacific has produced 7 named storms. The historical average for this point in the calendar sits between 5 and 6. Fausto is the latest system in a season that is already running hot. NOAA is projecting roughly twice the normal number of tropical cyclones in the Central Pacific Basin this year, the region that includes the waters immediately around Hawaii. The calendar tells the rest of the story. The Central Pacific hurricane season peaks between August and October. Fausto is arriving in late July. Fausto is arriving before the peak. Every storm that follows Fausto will form in an ocean that is warmer, in a wind pattern that is more favorable for tropical development, and in a calendar window historically more likely to produce direct hits. There is one more term the advisory language keeps returning to. Fausto is expected to degrade into a remnant low by Thursday. A remnant low is what a hurricane becomes when it loses its organized spinning structure and its thunderstorm activity collapses. It can still deliver rain and gusty wind. It is no longer classified as a tropical system. That is the projected end state for Fausto. But the fuel that created Fausto does not degrade with it. The warm ocean underneath the storm stays warm. The El Niño pattern above the water stays in place. The wind shear that tore Fausto down could ease within days, and when it does, the next disturbance to form over that same stretch of water has the same fuel, or more. Here is the central question the data raises. If a storm that forecasters expect to weaken before it arrives is already producing life-threatening conditions before it reaches the islands, what does a storm that does not weaken look like when it reaches an island chain still carrying last season's damage? Hold two facts next to each other. On one side, the official forecast. Fausto will weaken. Fausto will pass north of the islands. The center of the storm is not expected to make landfall. That is what the science supports, and that is what the National Hurricane Center is publishing. On the other side, the ground reality. Hawaii entered this moment with $1 billion in unrepaired damage from March. Drainage systems built in the 1960s, 40 miles of coastal roads already at risk of flooding without a hurricane involved, and 3,600 families still waiting on FEMA aid from the last storm. Neither of these facts cancels the other. They are both true at the same time. That is the readiness gap. It is the space between what a forecast says will happen and what the ground is actually able to handle when it does. Safety is not determined by whether a storm weakens. Safety is determined by whether the place it approaches is capable of absorbing even the weakened version. The forecast answers one question. The infrastructure answers a different one, and right now those two answers are pointing in opposite directions. If you live on the islands, or if someone you love does, the practical question is not whether Fausto is a Category 1 or a tropical storm at closest approach. The practical question is what 14 days of supplies actually looks like in your home, and whether the road out of your neighborhood stays open when the water rises. Tell us in the comments what preparedness looks like where you are, and if you have ever been somewhere that was not ready when a storm arrived, share what you saw. Subscribe, because the Central Pacific season peaks between August and October, and every storm that follows Fausto will be tracked here in real time as the ocean keeps feeding the pattern. If someone you know lives in Hawaii or is traveling there this week, send them this video before Tuesday. We will be back with the next update the moment the advisory changes.